the way we deal with our thoughts, emotions, and stories drives everything. It's critical to how we love, how we live, how we parent, how we lead, and indeed how we deal with a pandemic.
Individuals have to know how to handle fear. They have to know how to navigate with that. They have to know how to not allow it to run them.
Emotional agility is basically the psychological skills that help you to be healthy with yourself. And really this involves a couple of components. The first is being able to be curious with yourself. So we all have thoughts, emotions, stories, everything going on right now, and the ability to be curious with ourselves is really important, and we'll explore what I mean by that. The ability to be compassionate with yourself, that what you're going through now could be exciting or it could be super tough, and for a lot of people it's super tough. So it's about being compassionate, and it's also about being courageous. So the short definition is it's about emotional health, what it means to be healthy as a human being. But there are some very specific ways that we can be healthy with ourselves. And these are about compassion, it's about curiosity, and it's about courage with our thoughts, our emotions, and with the stories that we experience every single day inside ourselves.
Yes. And one of the things that you really did for me was help to change the way that I was labeling things, even for myself. I was doing it at micro levels, but our emotions are so varied and beautiful and wonderful and provide a lot of great feedback. But we tend to have this concept that we need to be happy. If we're not happy, there's a problem. And I think that right now, a lot of folks are kind of feeling that, like right now, they're not happy. And so they're kind of, identifying the problem and not really looking at what this emotion or what our emotions, the feedback that it's giving us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Shawn, this is critical. This is a really important part of emotional agility, which is, if you think about our thoughts, so we might have thoughts like, I just can't take it anymore. This is ridiculous. We might have emotions. Emotions might be things like loneliness, stress, discomfort, anger, frustration, the full range of emotions that we're experiencing. And then we've got stories. I mean, some of our stories were written on our mental chalkboards when we were 5 years old. Stories about who we are, what kind of people we are, what kind of life we deserve, what kind of love we deserve. And the way we deal with our thoughts, emotions, and stories drives everything. It's critical to how we love, how we live, how we parent, how we lead, and indeed how we deal with a pandemic. So what you talk about, which is so critical, is that one of the narratives that we have in society is that we've got to be positive, that even in the shadow of illness and death, that we've got to be happy, looking for silver linings, grateful, all of these narratives that we have. And what I really do in my work is push very strongly against this idea that we've just got to be positive. And there are a couple of reasons for this. The first is that when you are experiencing difficult emotions and you try to force positivity, what you're basically doing is you're not living in the world as it is. You're living in the world as you wish it would be. And if you are feeling something that's difficult right now, that is what you are feeling right now, and trying to pretend otherwise is not actually dealing with the reality. And you might say, well, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a couple of really, really important differences in terms of our well-being. The first is that we know that people who pretend to be happy or try to be happy or try to be positive, what actually happens is they are very often doing something which is called emotion suppression. What this means is that they're feeling upset or lonely and they're saying, well, at least I've got a job, I should be happy, or at least, at least I should be happy. And so they're pushing these difficult emotions aside. And we know that when we suppress our emotions in an ongoing way, actually what it does is it is predictive of higher levels of depression, higher levels of anxiety. A second reason why we don't want to just force positivity is that when we do this, it's denial, it's avoidant. And so we are not then actually developing skills that help us to say, gee, what I'm struggling with is this, and this is how I need to navigate the situation. So you're not actually in a situation where you then are able to come up with solutions and strategies to what it is you're facing. So those are some of the reasons why forced positivity is so destructive. But we know that people over time who try to just put on happy actually become less happy, that there is a real decrement in terms of people's capacity. And Shawn, just by the way, this is not only in terms of oneself. We know that when people try to force others into happiness, actually what it does is it is detrimental to the relationship. It's detrimental to how we develop skills in our children. And even if you're a manager or a leader, we know that when managers and leaders try to push aside the difficult emotions of their team, when they say things like, oh, let's just be optimistic, let's just get on with it, actually what's so fascinating is the team's blood pressure increases. The team doesn't even know that the manager's doing this, but they actually have this physiological effect. And really what this does is it leads one to experience others when there is this suppressed emotion as being false, inauthentic, and difficult to actually relate to. And so it's no surprise then that forced positivity, as I've already mentioned, impacts on people's well-being, but it also actually impacts on people's relationships as well as their capacity to actually achieve their goals because it is avoidant.
Ooh, this is so good. So we tend to, in our culture, force positivity upon ourselves and force it on other people. Just cheer up, don't worry, be happy, get over it. And we're not using the vital and valuable information, the feedback that our emotions are giving us.
This is profoundly important. Everywhere we go on social media, it seems like people are telling us to find silver linings, just be positive. And the opposite of that is if you somehow aren't positive, you're bringing me down, you're toxic, and therefore I need to do away with you. You know, that is the messaging that is in our society. And really what I want to promote is that this idea, we think that we are being positive and happy and that it's actually helping us to be more resilient and more successful. But actually what we know is that it actually lowers resilience. And I don't just mean this in us as individuals or us in relationships. I really mean us as a society. When we cannot go to difficult emotions, when we can't learn from difficult emotions, we fail to actually develop skills to navigate a simple truth. And the simple truth is that there is pain in the world and there is difficulty in the world. And when we just force positivity, we are bypassing that reality. And therefore, we aren't actually able to show up to ourselves and others. And Shawn, you know, what you point out is this really important aspect of why. And Charles Darwin first described that emotions are functional, that emotions help us to communicate with others, but also with ourselves. And so when we push aside our difficult emotions, we struggle to develop skills that help us to adapt and therefore thrive in the world, because our emotions are critically important in helping us to adapt. And if there was ever a time that we needed to adapt, it's now. You know, it's in the shadow of uncertainty.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. So important. This is why I wanted to have this conversation with you specifically, is that I think many of us feel that, of course, there's something kind of off with the world, but we can think that there's something wrong with us because we feel fear or because we feel uncertain or because we feel sad or anger. You know, I've heard a lot of people say they've experienced rage during this time, and it might be uncharacteristic. And so we might go and just pretend those things aren't happening and try to get back to normal, find something to be happy about, when in actuality, you're sharing that this is giving us an opportunity to develop some kind of capacity or character trait.
Absolutely. It is profoundly, profoundly important. And I'll give you an example of what I mean here. Of course, when you go on social media and you see things like just be positive, or even, beyond that, things like, oh, well, if you didn't use your time in quarantine to dust off your screenplay or write a book, it's not that you didn't have the time, it's that you lack the discipline. And so what's really started to happen is this idea that somehow hustle culture and pushing through and positivity have become conflated with success, that you can only be successful if you are doing these things. And it is the opposite, and we can explore some of the reasons for this. But the first thing that I would really encourage anyone who's experiencing difficult and tough emotions right now to do is to not try to do away with them. Don't hustle with your difficult emotions or think that you shouldn't have them. Your emotions were designed to help you to adapt and to deal with threat. And if there was ever a time that we in humanity, in society, have been threatened, it is in the shadow of illness and death. So if you are feeling difficult emotions right now, there is nothing wrong with this. In fact, they are normal and expected.
Well, let's come down to a fact of science so we get this clear. Less than 1% of disease is connected to genes. So I say, where the hell is all the disease coming from? And it goes, it's coming from stress. And I say, what's stress? Now, this is really important because stress is anything that gets in the way of your destination. I want to have this, I want to go there, whatever, and then something gets in the way, that, provokes stress. And I go, so why is it relevant? Because stress is the cause of disease of 90% of the people. And I say, why is that relevant? Again, that's not genetic, that's a perception. I am stressed because I believe I'm stressed, and therefore my cells are going to respond to my stress. Whether it's real or not, the cells can't see it. They only are based on what I believe. So stress interferes with the immune system. Let's do stress right now because the whole world's in a stress situation. So let me give you the 3 fundamental things that happen when you're in stress. Why do we recognize stress for? And I go, because we're being threatened. That's what stress means. Something's threatening you. Let's go back, thousands of years, and I say, what was the stress? I say, saber-toothed tiger. I go, oh, okay. I say, well, what happens when the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you? I say, you got to run like hell. I say, well, what organs in your body do you use to deal with stress? I go, arms and legs. Escape. So I say, now here comes the next point. If I'm going to need those organs to escape from the tiger, then here's the most important thing. I need to give them energy, because without energy, the muscles aren't going to work. So I say, what provides energy? I say, blood. So I go, oh, why is it relevant? Now here it comes. When I perceive a stress hormones' function is to provide as much blood to my arms and legs as I can get, because I need all of that energy to run away from the tiger. So I say, well, where's it getting the blood from? I said, well, the heart's pumping the blood. Yeah, but it's pumping it all over the body. So I say, well, when the blood is in my gut, what is the function of the organs? Lungs, gut, all those organs in there. I say, maintenance of the body, health of the body, fixing the body, and all that. And I say, well, if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, do you think it's good to invest in taking care of your body at this point? I go, what a waste of time. If the tiger catches you, the hell with the body, it's not going to exist anyway. So here's number 1. When stress is perceived, stress hormones released into the body cause the blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut. I go, why? Because when they squeeze shut, the blood is pushed to the outside, arms and legs, okay? So I say, yeah, but net consequence? You shut down the blood vessels in the gut and you shut down the maintenance and health of the body. I say, yeah, but for how long? How long does it take to get away from that tiger? 10 minutes? 15 minutes? You're away from the tiger, stress is gone, everything's back in condition again. People can experience this when you get that stress moment. It's like, they call it butterflies in the stomach. They feel like a queasy. I said, what's the queasy? It's the blood vessels squeezing shut. You can feel them. It's like fluttering. Okay, so number 1, stress shuts down blood flow to the gut because it's going to make sure the blood goes preferentially to the arms and legs. Number 2, this is critical now. The immune system uses tremendous amount of energy. Most people, when they get really sick, don't even have the energy to get out of bed. So I say, well, let's say I have a bacterial infection and a saber-toothed tiger is chasing me. How should I split my energy? Again, the hell with a bacterial infection. If the tiger, the saber-toothed tiger catches you, the infection doesn't mean anything anymore. It's the tiger's problem. So I go, okay, so what does it mean? Fact. Stress hormones shut off the immune system to conserve energy to run away from the tiger. Okay? And I go, wow, so stress hormones shut it down. I go, so much so, listen, medical doctors use stress hormones therapeutically, meaning if they want to transplant an organ from person A into person B, and you put that organ in, the foreign organ, into the recipient, the immune system of the recipient is going to say, that's foreign, and try and destroy it. And I say, well, what good is the operation if I just take the organ and put it into somebody else and the immune system messes with it? And I go, this is why medical doctors give patients that are going to receive a transplant, they give them stress hormones, because when they give them the stress hormones and then do the transplant, the recipient's immune system is not going to be working, and it will sustain the transplant. How effective of shutting off the immune system? It's used therapeutically to shut off the immune system. Okay, so that's number two. We compromise growth and health. We shut down the immune system. I call the third consequence adding insult to injury. And I go, what do you mean? Well, the brain has, in the forebrain, this is conscious part of the brain. And in the conscious part of the brain, that's creative. Okay? And I go, that's great. And I say, what about the hindbrain? I go, the hindbrain is reflex reaction. And I go, if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, do you want to have consciousness running the show, or do you want to just have reflex reaction carry you away? And the answer is consciousness is too slow. I always say, oh, you're in a car, spinning, it just starts to get out of control. I say, if you stay in the conscious mind when that car's going out of control, here's my model. Oh, all you're going to do is you're going to just get lost. I say, the moment the car goes out of control, guess what? Stress hormones shut off that immune system, push the blood. When I squeeze the blood vessels in the forebrain, it pushes the blood to the hindbrain where reflexes are going to work. I say, what? I go, we become less intelligent when we're under stress because consciousness is too slow. And when you're running, so I go, so what's the issue? Historically, the stress response was to be used for a short period of time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You escape the tiger, no more stress. And I go, and what about today? And I go, oh, got a little problem here, 24/7, 365 stress. The system was not designed for that. And this excess stress is responsible for up to 90% of disease on this planet, not genes. Genes, less than 1%. And all of a sudden I say, why is this important? Because if you tell somebody genes cause that, then that gives them, oh, I'm not responsible. The genes did it. I go, no, because if you feel you're not responsible, you shut off your control. And that's the point. I am in control.
Man, this is so powerful. What really struck me the most was when you said we become less intelligent when we're under stress. And I think this is one of the most well-seen things right now with people infighting. There's a big lack of intelligence and even empathy and compassion, and these higher order things are going to get put on the back burner.
Yeah, let me give you an example about the difference between growth and protection, because that's what it comes down to. A stimulus provokes us to do something. If it's a good stimulus, you move to it, like love, food, something you want. That's a stimulus, we move to that stimulus. And then I say, but when you move to it, you go open-armed. Why? I want to take it in. If it's love, I don't want to close myself down. I want to assimilate it. If it's food, I got to open myself up, take it in. So growth means you go to the stimulus open, okay? But what if the stimulus is negative? A threat of any kind. I go, oh, I don't go to the stimulus. I go away from the stimulus. Do I go away, my arms open? I go, no. You close yourself down because of protection. So I say, so what's the difference? Growth, go to a stimulus, arms open. Protection, go away from the stimulus, arms closed. I say, why is it relevant? And here's a simple conclusion. You can't move forwards and backwards at the same time. You can't be open and closed at the same time. So basically it says, if you're in a stress mode, you've shut your system down and growth shut down, and that's okay for a very short period. But if it's chronic, you've killed yourself, essentially. And I say, so why is it relevant? I go, look at today's world. Every time you turn on TV, be afraid, be very afraid, go hide in your house. And I go, wow, that's scary as hell. I say, why is it relevant? I am getting stress hormones dripping into my system every time I watch that damn TV. I'm getting stress hormones when I read a paper, go and surf the internet. And I go, and what is that doing for you? And I say, it is compromising your health. I go, oh. I say, that's where disease comes from. Not from the genes, but you shut yourself down. And then, as I said, you become less intelligent. Then what do? Defer to the boss. Who's the one that's going to protect me? Whatever they say, I'm going to do. Why? I'm not thinking. I'm just going to do what they say because they know I don't know. I go, oh my God, have we just screwed the world big time? I go, why? Because the planet is on 24/7 stress. Any compromises to your health have compromised your immune system. Okay? And I go, so what does that mean? Now listen to this. In America, 40% of U.S. citizens have 2 or more, actually 2.7 chronic diseases. 2.7. One chronic disease, 60% of Americans have. But 40% of the Americans have 2.7. I go, so why is it relevant? They're compromised before the damn virus even showed up. And I go, well, why is that relevant? Because when the virus shows up, are they weakened because the virus is so strong? Or are they weakened because their immune system is under stress? And I go, that's the one. I say, but you blame the virus. And then everybody's now afraid. Healthy people are afraid. I go, if you're healthy, get the damn virus and get it over with because your immune system will make the best vaccine in the whole world. Our immune system is better than any pharmaceutical company could ever be. But then to get an immune response, you have to have the COVID. And I say, well, why is that relevant? And I go, well, everybody's hiding. And this is why. Why did they put quarantine in the first place? Number one, let me just go into this. We make an immune response to things in our environment that we experience. When something new comes in the environment that's threatening, like the COVID virus, it's not that new actually, because coronaviruses are the cold viruses that we get every year. This is just a new species. So I say, new species? I go, yeah, most people have not been exposed to anything like this. So when the virus shows up, oh, everybody is susceptible. Why? It hasn't been here. And I go, so when the virus first got here and there was an overrun in the hospital of people with problems from COVID, they said, we must slow down, so we're going to put everybody in a quarantine. I go, okay, good. You slowed it down. Now what? Okay, everybody come out of quarantine. I go, did they get an immune response while they were in quarantine? Or did the virus disappear when they were in quarantine? I go, no. What in the logical world do you think would happen? You take all this fresh meat and throw it out there and say, quarantine over. I go, they're going to, second spike. It has to be. There was no other option but a second spike. And I go, and then what's happening? Who are the ones that are dying? And the answer is people who are compromised. Most of them over 65, 75, 80 years old. They're compromised because of lifestyle and age and all that stuff. And I go, what about the average person? It goes, that's where the numbers got screwed. Why? Okay, momentary math situation. I say, how do you determine what's called morbidity? The number of people that, what's the relationship to the virus and death? I say, it's a fraction. You take the number of people that died, put it above, and you divide it by the number of people that have had the COVID, okay? And I go, why is it relevant? Because in the beginning, the only people who were identified to have COVID were the ones sick enough to go to a doctor and to a hospital. So all of a sudden I say, well, why is it relevant? I say, that's a small number. And I say, yeah, but a large number of them died. So all of a sudden it's like, death rate, when you put the small number divided into the higher number, you get a very high percentage. Oh, 3-4% of people are going to die. I go, okay, here was the problem. When they started to do testing, they found out 80-90% of the people have COVID, didn't go to a doctor, didn't go to a hospital, and did not get included in the numbers. So I say, what's important? If you took all of the people that have the COVID and divided in the number that die, it's down to like 0.4, 0.5% or something like that. A little bit more aggressive than a conventional flu, but not a killer. And I go, wow, this all of a sudden changes the morbidity. The scary number, millions of people are going to die. I go, that's based on a number that's totally false. Because when we started to put the number of people that were healthy, that got the COVID and didn't go to the doctor, didn't go to the hospital, never got reported, I say, if you leave that large number out, then morbidity is high. You put that larger number in there, boom, it drops down. And they're holding us to some stupid number from the beginning of days when 3 or 4% of the population is going to die. That is a sham. That is a manipulation of the data, and it is totally false. And I say, so what's the relevant? Well, you got them scared to death. I say, oh, you scared them. I say, what's the result of that? You've messed with their immune system. You've already compromised their immune system because the stress hormones function shut off the immune system. The more you scare them, the worse the consequence of the COVID is. Quantum physics is the most valid science on this planet. It's the one that's been tested the most and verified to be more truthful than any other science. I go, so what? Because what's the first principle of quantum physics? The mind is the creator of our life experiences. And it says your consciousness is creating your life. I go, why is that relevant? Because if you change your consciousness, you can change your life. It's like you don't have to wait for life to change from the outside. It's you on the inside. And so we have been systematically disempowered. You have been manipulated by a belief system, and then belief controls genetics, and belief controls your biology. And if you start with a negative belief, you only end up with a negative biology. It's the only way it happens.
That's the virus of the mind, first of all, is fear. And fear diminishes your perspective, blocks your perception, inhibits wisdom, guidance, and direction. So the world has taken a nightmare pill where they're living in the vibration of a worst-case scenario and all the things that come with that. From the higher perspective, we're in a deep cleansing, which means that we're in a great clearing right now. You can see when you look out on the world events, things that would have taken years for us to discover. We now find out the next day. Like politicians would tell a lie. You wouldn't know that for 5 years. They got away with it. Today, you can see them lying right in front of you. You know they're telling a lie. So things are much more transparent. So right now we're in a situation where you're looking at the death of an old paradigm and the birth of the new. But the old paradigm is very loud and trying to hold on. And the new, you have little buds of the new springing up, but they're not as loud as the old. And so I always like to say that those who are waking up and are embracing a higher order of being, love, compassion, generosity, service, there's no superiority or inferiority around humanity. We're all sourced from the same source. People who are awakening to that, I like to say that we are the reporters of the new paradigm that's yet to be. And the other individuals are reporters of the status quo and that which is dying. So when you turn on the news and you look at the reporters telling you something, they're actually reporting from a status quo and old paradigm. And it inundates people's minds. People actually believe what they're looking at, even though they forget that we live in one of the most censored countries in the world. And you're only going to get what powers that be want you to see. So when you ask what's going on, there's a lot of flux, a lot of turbulence. What looks bad, and it is terrible, death, mayhem, police brutality, politicizing of a COVID-19 making a political football rather than dealing with some serious science behind it. It's all a part of an old paradigm trying to hold on, And the first thing that has to happen is individuals have to know how to handle fear. They have to know how to navigate with that. They have to know how to not allow it to run them. Sometimes what I ask people to do is to take out a newspaper, read it from front to back, put it away, and then pick it up 6 months later and read it. And you'll see all the things that was the top headlines, and everybody was concerned about this, and has generally faded, and something else is taking its place. And what is taking its place is another fear-based way of looking at life. So we have to understand that these things do pass. Now, the way that you're describing this is there's the universal perspective, millions of galaxies, multidimensional universes, the cosmos always expanding, the eternal presence that we're living in. That's timeless. And then there's time. And so our role is to bring the timeless into time, meaning creativity, innovativeness, resourcefulness, poetry, generosity. Those are timeless. It means you've gone to a space outside of time and you've brought something into time. That's what a soulful artist does. They bring something into time. So most people lose their perspective and they live primarily from fight or flight. They're trying to save their life. They're into the survival frequency. They lose their perspective of the cosmos, of their connection to the timeless. So this is what spiritual practice is all about. It's not about magical thinking or wishing that something wasn't happening or burying your head in the ground and pretending that a bad thing did not happen. It is about understanding that in this universal perspective, there aren't any problems. There are only ideas and solutions and spiritual prototypes, and we have to go there and get them and bring them here. This is a solution for everything. There cannot be a problem and not be a solution. That's an impossibility. But you don't get to the solution from fear or being time blinded. The solution comes from your expanded awareness.
Anxiety is simply defined as that worry for an imminent possible event or worry about uncertainty. So look around, pandemic, Delta variant. What could be more uncertain than that? And fall coming with us and school going back and all of that. So not surprising that base definition of anxiety going up. And, before the pandemic, 90% of the population raised their hands when asked, do you feel anxiety during the day? That has clearly gone up. And so this is something that we're not suffering all alone. Look around the room. 90% plus more people in this room are feeling these same feelings as you are. So that's the important place to start. So where does it stem in the brain? So it stems from our stress response system. This is an evolutionarily ancient system that was developed, and this is a key point in the book. The stress and anxiety response system was evolved to protect us. It is a protective mechanism. And I like to say that over and over again because all of us, including me, it's like, stress, anxiety, just get it out, just make it leave. But this is one of the key messages in good anxiety. At its core, it is protective. How can we reshape and refunnel the activation energy in stress and anxiety to help it protect us more, get back to that core feature? And so how do we do that? Everybody's heard of the fight or flight response. It is undergirded by a part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. That's automatic. If there is a danger or a possible danger, what happens? Your heart rate goes up. Your respiration goes up. All your blood leaves from your digestive and reproductive systems, goes to your muscles to allow you to either fight or run away. And that happens whether there's a lion coming at you or whether there's a big worry of global warming, pandemic, all these things. Even the threat of that possibility, that anxiety can activate the same system. So that's where we're getting tripped up in our modern society. Way back 2.5 million years ago, our ancestors had the same system, but they weren't bombarded with stress and anxiety every single day. There's an occasional lion that might come our way and we can run and get rid of it and then go back to normal. Today, 24-hour news cycles, Instagram feeds, all the time reminding us of the beautiful clothes and the beautiful life we don't have and all of the dangers in our world, which are real. And so it's activating our stress system to an overload. And that is not healthy. That is not normal. And good anxiety gives you a huge list of tools to start to address that overload of stress and anxiety.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So powerful. Yeah. I love the detail that you gave, the ancient human example, and then a modern circumstance.
Yeah.
And really what I took away from that is a very clear indication that this overwhelming fear, stress, anxiety, those very important systems that we have, they can respond to what is an imminent real threat and to what is imagined as well. And your brain doesn't know the difference. Is that right?
Yeah, your brain and your bodily response does not know the difference. So you can be worried about global warming, even when, we're not experiencing it, even though we are. And that will give us the same, fear response. And again, it's protective. We're getting ready to move, to act on it. And that's the other problem. A lot of these issues are, there isn't the lion to run away from. And so what I've talked about in the book and what I've given tools for is to help you turn that worry into some kind of action to dissipate, to use that energy in a positive way. Why am I doing that? Because that is what the system was evolved to do. And it gives you a way to dissipate that. It decreases your anxiety. It uses that activation energy, but in a way that is beneficial for us.
Yeah. So this experience, so first of all, I want to reiterate this. Our experience of anxiety is actually biological feedback.
Yes.
And it's giving way to a new change in perception, in action. And our issue though, and I want to ask you about this, instead of addressing this critical feedback that the anxiety is giving us, and also I want to mention this too, that the anxiety can be that the superficial thing that we see, but it can be something that's unconscious, potentially, that's driving the anxiety.
Yeah, sure.
But so it can be used more of an investigative tool.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But in our society today, we often utilize things to basically suppress it.
Exactly.
And so what are some of those things that we tend to do, like drinking, for example, or maybe being on social media and potentially making it worse.
Right. So we talk about this in the book as different categories of coping mechanisms. Everybody has their coping mechanisms, from potato chips to chocolate to Netflix watching. And there are definitely more positive coping mechanisms. If you turn to meditation, if you turn to calming breath work, positive coping mechanisms. Alcohol is a common one that one can indulge in every once in a while, but too much that becomes a negative coping mechanism because it feeds some of those negative feelings. And also, going back to the importance of sleep, it can diminish your sleep. That makes your brain and your emotional regulation much more poor. And that does not help with your stress or anxiety at all. So there are different categories we talk about. And one of the exercises is to take a look and list out your particular coping mechanisms and start to categorize them. A lot of this book is helping you step back and take a look at what you are doing in your life around anxiety and being more mindful about that and learning from it. And as you're saying, I think anxiety can be one of the most powerful self-help tools that we never knew we had. I mean, imagine that it goes from the thing that you want to throw out the door and never see to something that actually could help me learn about myself, make my life less stressful if I just learn how to learn from it.
This is so good. So what could anxiety be trying to tell us?
Yeah.
For example, like what are some examples if we're feeling that just existential angst or feeling impending doom? You describe a lot of the different feelings that people get. You mentioned like there's a garden variety daily anxiety, and then there's more severe instances, but they're all giving us biological feedback.
Right, exactly.
What could anxiety be trying to tell us?
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to understand is it tells us more about what we value, what we really love, and what we need in this life. And throughout the book, you will learn all about my own personal anxieties because they are the examples that I turn to. And so one of the anxieties that I talk about that has been with me for a very, very long time that people don't initially appreciate because I'm a speaker and a teacher is that I was a very, very shy kid. And it was social anxiety that I had. I didn't like to speak out. I was very awkward in social situations. I was never one of the cool kids. I was the wallflower. And even in class, I loved learning. I loved school, but I found it hard to raise my hand and jump into those conversations like I wanted to. And that really taught me about how much I wanted to be a part of social interactions, even though I was afraid to do it. And over the years, I've learned how to speak out, how to become a good and effective teacher and speaker. And those were things, that fear is something that I needed to get over. But it's really taught me how much, ever since I was a young girl, I valued those friendships, those social interactions, and it's changed the way that I appreciate my friends, my family. In fact, this has changed as I wrote the book, and I'll just bring up one of the other things I learned from that particular anxiety, which is I realized it was one of my special gifts that came from my form of anxiety, because I was working hard to figure out what are those lessons that come from anxiety. And I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this all of my teaching career. So what have I been doing? I have been spending extra time and effort making sure that the shy students in my class, the students that didn't raise their hands like Hermione Granger and Ronna Anson, pick me, pick me, pick me. I love those students too. But I was concerned with the ones that were too shy to do that still wanted to interact with me. They wanted to show me what they knew. How did I know that? Because I wanted to show my teacher what I knew. Like see what I'm thinking about and see how I understand this. And so I spend the time before class and after class and during office hours, making sure that there are safe spaces for the less, bold students to come and just chat casually so that I could get their insight and kind of take the pulse of the class that way. Why do I do that? That takes a lot of time. I do that because I know how they feel. That form of empathy comes from my anxiety, and everybody has that. What is your worst anxiety? You know how that feels, and you can turn that around and make that into a gift of empathy that is unique and special to you. And once I realized that, I'm like, okay, that is the core. That is the lesson. That is the learning that teaches me about myself, but also gives me gifts to give to other people.
One of the things you learn is that we're running on autopilot. 95% of the stuff that's happening with you is happening without you realizing it. And when you're in a state of fear, especially a perpetual state of fear, You cannot think rationally in the same way that you can when you're in a different brain state. Your physiology is different. You cannot process emotions and data the same way that you can when you're not in that fear state. So anyway, we have been conditioned to be in a fear state for over a year now, from all sorts of different directions. And, there are a few different articles I've read about how if you look across the different countries over the past year with the pandemic and all this, it's been about 50-50 good news, bad news. In America, though, the media environment puts out 90% bad news.
Right.
So when you are being conditioned, like we don't realize that those little ads that are following us around the internet, like buy this mask or buy this hat, or the billboard that you're driving down the highway and just catches the corner of your eyes, like buy a Big Mac, it's red, and or you're not a man if you don't buy this jewel for your wife. Just like these things affect us, and they are something that we wouldn't have had to have our shields up against, historically speaking, as humans. So knowing that we're in this environment, be very careful with your media diet, with what you're exposed to. If you're in that state of fear, you're going to be conditioned and almost hypnotized into a different state. And what I'm seeing is essentially hypnosis. It's like a mild hypnosis among the population, such that you have these bubbles of people who are living in a completely different reality than other people. And if your reality is being dictated from the top down, that's a very dangerous place to be. It's a very dangerous place to make decisions from. So do what you can to detach. One of the reasons we live in the middle of nowhere is because we can just go out there, and you see how little a lot of the stuff that seems like it matters on the internet, you see how little it actually matters. When you might get eaten by a lion, or like you'll die if you stay out all night because it gets cold up here in the mountains, like that stuff is real. Yeah. The internet isn't real. A lot of the fear, a lot of the messaging, it's just virtual still. And if you turn it off, you'd be amazed by the mental space that you get back. It's so worth it. Even just a few minutes a day. Don't go on anything. Turn it all off. Go away. Go on a walk. Not with your phone. Go on a walk by yourself, with someone you care about, with your dog. Have an actual human moment.
When we're in our survival brain, we're held hostage from our rational brain, our ability to make good decisions, our ability to see things clearly. And people know that, right? Media knows that. Politicians, they know that. And we're not going to make very, solid choices in our life when we're in that survival place, when we're in fear. Everything's going for just be able to live, right? And so we get irrational. We start hoarding toilet paper. We start doing things that just, start, seeing people through a different lens, which could be a big challenge, and even if outside of just the current world events, when people have fear, in Limitless, I talk about how limits are learned. And fear is a limit, right? It's a constraint. There's a border, some kind of boundary that we're bumping up against, and it could be, anxiety around taking a test. It could be fear of public speaking. It could be a fear of, starting a business, or getting into a committed relationships, where fear holds us back. And so in Limitless, I have a quote from a French philosopher, and he says, "Life is the C between B and D." And people are thinking I'm speaking in code, but B stands for birth, D stands for death, life, C stands for choice. I really do believe that these difficult times, they could define us. These difficult times can diminish us, or these difficult times, they could develop us. We decide. So some choices that we're working with clients, like little choices that they could make to be able to get over fear, to mitigate fear. So they're not in that fight or flight, where, like you mentioned, psychoneuroimmunology, where, they're more susceptible to colds, to flus, to viruses. Because if you're, chronic stress, we talk about how it shrinks the human brain, and there's different things that people could do to manage and cope with stress. Chronic fear, it's a big challenge. And so how do we manage it, right? And so some choices, first of all, I have this global, I think symbols are very powerful in the human psyche. I think metaphors are a wonderful way to learn. Metaphors are kind of a shortcut when you're comparing something you don't know to something that you do know, all of a sudden, you make a connection that wasn't there before. So the metaphor I'm using is one of big transformation is that of a butterfly, right? It's very simple. And a lot of people, while the beauty is in the butterfly, the growth happens in the cocoon. And a lot of people feel like they're in a cocoon, the past couple of years. They might be physically distancing themselves, and they might be alone. They might be alone with their thoughts. They might be, working at home or living at work. They don't know, or their kids are in and out of school. They're alone with their doubts. They might be feeling alone, right? Mental health is, challenges are on the rise. And so, while you're in this cocoon, how do you come out of it? Because while the beauty is in the butterfly, the growth happens in the cocoon, right? And so it's a struggle to be able to get out, that you develop strength and commitment, character, and the things that, capabilities. And so to be able to soar to new heights. So here are like 5 or 6 things that choices that they can make going back to the decisions. And we could riff on this. With your listeners on what they could do to just empower themselves, so they could have their sense of agency back, where they're not giving away, this kind of where they feel like they're a victim and this is happening to them, where they could, as you talk about, control the controllables. So I'll make them easy. I'll make them all C's. All right. So during this time is a wonderful time first to get clarity, right? Clarity is power. And because it's really hard to stop somebody who knows where they're going and why they're going there. You know what I mean? But a lot of people, like, we're living, there are forces out there that try to confuse you with their messages, with manipulation of data, and a confused mind doesn't do anything, right? So you're immobilized, right? Just like what fear could lead to, freezing or fleeing, right? And so clarity. And so clarifying questions, I believe questions are the answer. They're an amazing tool that we could use. One question is something simple like, just start basic. Solitude is a wonderful time for self-reflection. And so maybe it's asking yourself, what's most important to me in life? What's most important to me in my health? What's most important to me in my career? Zero-based thinking. If I was to start over, what's really important to me in my security and my personal freedoms and the things that matter to me most. I always tell people it's not just time management, it's priority management. That the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, right? And so what is most important to you? Maybe it is your freedom. Maybe it is growth. Maybe it is love and family. Maybe it is contribution. Maybe it is safety. Maybe it is adventure, right? So that's your North Star. Because sometimes when we're going 100 miles, as many people do, we're just burning, right? Driving that car, going really fast. We don't ask ourselves, hey, am I still going in the right direction, right? Because we just do it every single day. And we know through studies that, upwards of 40% or more of our behaviors are just habitual. They're unconscious, right? We're on autopilot. But like Dr. Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says, you don't want to climb the ladder of success really efficiently and get to the top and realize the ladder's leaning on the wrong wall. So the second question I would ask, besides what's most important to you in these areas, what's most important to you where you're going to live, what's most important to your kid's education, are my actions align with those values? That's the congruency and the integrity. The most fulfilled people and the happiest people, those cultivating those emotions to kind of to be able to dilute the fear that's out there, they're on purpose, right? And so a lot of people feel burnt out because of fear, because they're burning on all cylinders, and their hormones and are all out of whack. They're staying up late at night because they're on social media scrolling through all the crazies that's going on. And I would say that sometimes we don't feel burnt out because we're doing too much. Sometimes we feel exhausted and burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that really matter, the things that light us up, the things that make us come alive. And so I would really hone in on those, 4 or 5 things that are most important to us, and take some time to pause and just ask yourself, and then have this conversation with your kids, have this conversation with your significant other, find out what their values are also as well. And are we doing things every single day to kind of, to meet those things?
Yeah, I love this so much. And thank you for pointing out to have these conversations with our kids as well. Our kids are some of the people who are unfortunately struggling the most right now with this time. It's kind of a massive, big social experiment. And so finding out what is their biggest value, what's most important for them, what's their priority, and asking these clarifying questions. What's most important to their health? What's most important to their happiness? And the same thing with our significant other. And there's something healing, of course, just having these conversations, period.
Yeah.
And the thing about you, man, like, you help to bring out what's kind of rattling around in our minds to the surface so we can get a good look at it. And I want to reiterate this point, that clarity. So we've got our clarity question. So it might be, what's most important to me in life? And for you, it might be your family, right? But are your actions actually demonstrating that is your biggest priority? And if not, wouldn't this be a good time to adjust to make that the reality? And same thing with our health. And when it may seem like the world has taken something away, for example, like your priority with your health is, working out, going to the gym, but the gyms are closed down. The parks have got the caution tape up around it. You're just like, they're taking away my ability to exercise and to be healthy. But this is an opportunity for us to find a way, get creative, because chances are this isn't the first time that something abnormal is going to happen in life. And so I think it also develops that skill set of resilience. This is so good, man. So clarity is number one, and it's amazing. This is so important.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about the choices. Life is a C between B and D. These are small choices, and you don't have to spend hours on this, but that's, I think part of success is just getting to know yourself, as you're evolving, through this life, whatever cycle that you happen to be in. And part of that, it could be journaling, it could be your own meditation, it could be talk therapy, right? Self-awareness really is a superpower. The second C, I would say, and in no specific order, is care. Again, something your show is all about, that self-care is not selfish. And all the things that we talk about, and it's not just eating the best, foods and optimizing your sleep, or going to getting body work done. It also is, caring. Part of self-care is realizing when you say yes to somebody or something, you're not saying no to yourself, right? And a lot of people, they're burnt out because they have too many tabs open, right? And it's still taking up a lot of space. It's requiring a lot of energy. People are overcommitting all the time to things that they can't fulfill on. And so there's a kind of a breach with your own commitments and your own trust with yourself. I would also say that, part of self-care is making the choice when you say yes to something, like all that craziness that, that's out there. Like, it's interesting. Like, a lot of us are on social media, right? And there's an algorithm to social media, clearly. And one of the algorithms is whatever you engage with, you get more of, right? So if you just happen to be really into, we mentioned this before, but cat videos or whatever, that you just engage, like, share, comment, watch all the cat videos, then they're going to show you a lot more cat videos. And that's going to be your perception. That's going to be your news feed. Well, your mind has a similar algorithm. Whatever you're consistently engaging with, they're going to show you more of. And, media marketing knows this. They, if it bleeds, it leads. If something is threatening, your part of your brain, let's say the amygdala gets, hijacked, and you have to pay attention because that's your survival. So you have to pay attention to what's dark, threatening, and scary. And the challenge is, if that's what you're engaging with, just like the cat videos, they're going to show you more of it. Your mind is going to see, literally in your observation, in your perception, more of that darkness, scariness, the threatening things, because that's what you're engaging with. You're training your nervous system, saying this is important. And the challenge, though, is that leaves you very little bandwidth for hope. That leaves you very little bandwidth for opportunity. That leaves you very small bandwidth for solutions. For the things, leaves you less bandwidth for gratitude, the things you can be grateful for. And so just a reminder with care, part of it is just, it's like self-love. It's falling in love with that person in the mirror that's been through so much, but is still standing, and making self-care a priority for you, your family, your team also as well. And that's why we're always feeding our minds with great podcasts like yourselves, with books, with great conversations and people. So and again, it could be 10 minutes, just like the other ones. It could be just like going for a 10-minute walk with your dog that day. Something that, because little by little, a little becomes a lot.
Yeah. Care. This is, for me, obviously, this is like the center point. So I want to connect these together with fear. This becomes like a force field in a sense, because you have the opportunity to train your brain to basically tune into what you care about, right? So if you're telling your brain that I care about cats and Beyonce, which is my wife's Explorer page on Instagram, then that's what you're going to see more
Right.
of, you know. But this is happening in the quote real world, whether we realize this or not. What are you tuned into? You get to demonstrate or tune your brain into, like, basically instruct your brain on what you care about. So that's very powerful. And that self-care and feeding our brains intentionally the things that provide that resilience and that self-care, that force field of positivity, is something that's within our power as well to kind of defend us against fear. I love that.
Exactly, because a lot of there's a huge cognitive load that's spent, you know, when we're scared or fearful, right? And it burns stress, fear burns a lot of energy, right? A lot of brain glucose. So, you know, you insulate yourself with, you know, the best force field ever. So that's the second C. The third one, I would say, again, we're talking about little choices that you can make to help kind of rewire your life, your nervous system, for confidence, for courage, for peace of mind. I would say the third one is contribution. You know, fear is something that we all experience. And, you know, just like we talk about in Limitless, that limits are learned, a lot of fears are learned, right? Like they say, somebody told me that, and I don't know if this is true, but the two things, like the two natural born fears that we have, fear of falling and fear of loud noises. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but, you know, pretty much we could all accept that most of the other fears are learned. You know, the fear of public speaking is not something like we're born with, right? It's something that we learned. And for me, that was one of my big fears, you know, which is ironic because that's all I do, you know, for a living. And so what I would say is contribution, how even with me, if I have a fear of public speaking, what I think about is that one person in the audience that I want to contribute to. And that takes my focus and my awareness off of my own anxiety or butterflies. And I put my attention on service, contribution, and, you know, where your focus goes, you know, that's where your energy is going. And once I do that, literally, Shawn, like, you know, I'm pretty introverted, you know, kind of pseudo really shy because of my learning disabilities growing up, and my traumatic brain injury. I was very self-conscious. My superpower was hiding growing up. That was really good. We were talking about
Hide and seek. Where the hell is Jim?
Yeah, exactly. I would sit behind the tall kid in class. I would always shrink down. I'd be invisible boy, right? Like I'd be able to, you know, because I never had the answers. And I didn't understand what people were talking about in school. You know, I didn't want to be picked for sports because I don't want to, like, I had a fear of just messing up and making mistakes and letting people down, right? You know, fears that we take on into adulthood. And so, you know, I would say that when it comes to contribution, it focuses your energy on service, right? I think we learn so we could earn, so we could return. Like we donated 100% of the proceeds to Limitless to charity, hundreds of thousands of dollars to build schools for children in need in Kenya, Guatemala, Ghana, to Alzheimer's research for women. And, you know, as we know that women are twice as likely to experience Alzheimer's than men. In memory of my grandmother, who I lost when I was going through my learning difficulties. But going back to contribution, I feel like, you know, that's why we're here. Everything in nature, it has to grow, but it also has to give, right? And you know, otherwise it's eliminated. And that I think that's important. And you don't give to get, you give because it's who you are. But I think contribution is one of the antidotes to fear. And it doesn't have to be huge. It could be making food for frontline workers. It could be contacting a neighbor that might be alone, right? And just little things like that make a difference.
Yeah. Man, I love this. That's so powerful because I don't know why I didn't even think of this, that you would bring this one up, because fear has a tendency to make us withdraw. And if we intentionally put forth contribution,
right,
it is an antidote. It's the opposite of what fear drives us to do. That's really remarkable, Jim.
So the question here would be like, how can you take some of your time, your talent, your treasure to make a difference? You know, I think, you know, when we're making a difference, it's something that gives us fulfillment, it gives us joy, and again, these are emotions that could drown out the fear and the negative self-talk and, you know, all those sensations where we feel immobilized. It gives us our power back again. You know, a lot of this conversation is about getting your agency back, because when we're in fear, we feel like we're at the effect, we feel like we're a thermometer. A thermometer just reacts to the environment. And as human beings, sometimes we react to the environment. We react to politics, react to what's going on in the world, the economy, how people treat us. But in actuality, the strongest, most successful, happiest, fulfilled people, the ones that have joy, they identify more with the thermostat. The thermostat doesn't react to the environment. It gauges. So you be a thermostat, gauge, know what's going on in the world, right? But then, you set a temperature and the environment reacts to you. Right. And you set a goal, you set a vision for what you want to do, a mission, how you want to disrupt things and make things better, and then make it the way you see it.
At the heart of it all, in my heart, I am such a fan of humanity. Like, I love people. Like, I love people who disagree with me. I love people who agree. I love everything in between. I love people. So I'm a fan of Team Human. Now, I think what unfortunately works against Team Human, and it's always self-inflicted, is when we live in fear. And that video, what it's like to believe everything the media tells you, my intention behind it was to help liberate people from their fear. And if a fish doesn't know it's swimming in water, we got to wake it up to realize it's in water, and let alone what kind of water it's in. And the late, great Ram Dass once said, you can't get out of a jail you don't know you're in. And we're, with what the media tells us, and I'm not here tinfoil hat, conspiracy, like, they're out to get you. I'm here to call a spade, and suggest that the mainstream media, it's fear-mongering. And it's a business model. It's not far-fetched, in my opinion, that the headlines, be they spoken or written online in print on your TV, the headlines are meant to evoke a fear response inside of your psyche. And that gets your attention, and that's survival reasons. If you're out in the wild, if something is scary, like the bushes move in an abnormal way, that gets your attention. It's human instinct. We want to focus on what scares us so that we can discern how to protect ourselves from that scary thing. Fight, flight, freeze, whatever the heck it's going to be. And thus the media gets our attention with the scary headlines and like, hey, by the way, it's been 3 minutes. Here's the latest death count. Well, okay, now 30 seconds later, here's the updated death count. By the way, it's scrolling on the bottom of the screen. So that's coming at us not only 24/7, but 24/7 from 360 degrees of angles. How good of a life are we going to live if we're in constant fear that's not in our best interest? Now, I think I'm going to get off my soapbox in a second here, but not yet. I think fear is such a healthy emotion when it serves us. If I hear a crash through my window, cool, like I'm going to be afraid, like what's going on? It's going to help alert me to a situation that is meaningful and beneficial for me to deal with. But when we are constantly being inundated with fear because we plug into the source of fear, we're glued to the headlines and getting our news from the news, which I liken to like, that's like getting financial advice from broke people. Then we're always being indoctrinated with fear that's not actually giving us helpful, meaningful information about how we can live a better life for ourselves. So with that video and probably dozens of videos I've made in the past 6 months, the intention is to help people realize the jail that they don't know they're in, the jail of fear. And given that fear is a human emotion, and I think a beneficial human emotion when it's a fear that serves us, it's one thing to be afraid. It's another thing to view life through the lens of fear and make decisions from the place of fear. Because we know, like in the old examples of, someone yelling fire in an old movie theater, the panic kills more people than the actual fire does. So I think it's very human of us to be afraid. Yet it is perhaps disempowering of us to make decisions from the fear and view our lives and everything else exclusively through the lens of fear. So, yeah, man, I'm doing my best to help people wake up to the fear that they don't know they're swimming in.
What I see is that we're in the middle of a great awakening, you know, and you're seeing the crumbling of the old paradigm, and you're seeing the emergence of what's happening new, both in the same space and the same time. You know, Newtonian physics, that can't exist. You can't have two objects in the same space, same time. But in quantum reality, you can have everything in the same space at the same time, but they're vibrating at different levels. So you have the old paradigm, fear, worry, lack, limitation, scarcity, not enough jobs, not enough this, not enough that. That's not real. That's made up, you know. And so what's happening is a crumbling of the old, where people are going to be forced to really get a sense of who they are and stop leaning on external things like governments and politicians and things of that particular nature. I tell people the only authority you have is the authority of your own conviction. That's the authority. You can't outsource your authority to someone out there. Those people work for you. You don't work for them. They work for you. And so your attention has to be on what kind of life you want to live and how that can assist you to live that life. Now, if you don't have a vision, then they're going to tell you what your vision is. If you don't have your own possibility for your own life, then you're going to listen to these people, and they're going to run your life, you see. So the idea is that we're in a great awakening. Everything is shifting. The world of phenomena is moving really fast, and there's an emergence taking place. There's people becoming more sovereign, people taking their authority back, people that are saying hell no. I mean, it's very similar to the vibration of during the Vietnam War when people woke up and said, whoa, wait a minute, we're going to go kill these people we don't know? Why? Why are we doing this? And nobody could give an answer. You know what I mean? So it's a stream of consciousness that's happening. And again, you don't see it because it's not on the news, but there's many people that are coming to an understanding that their own authority is here. It's their connection to the universe, not connection to a party, Republican, Democrat, Independent. You know, it's connected to something else. You know, and I think that's a precursor to something breaking down, to something else emerging. We have our inner authority connected to the presence. You know, we begin to have a vision of the kind of world we want to live in. We start to walk in that direction. Again, the reporters are reporting from the old paradigm. We're seeking to report from something new that's emerging. That means you have to see the invisible in order to do the impossible. The highest frequency always wins. That's a law. The highest frequency is more powerful than the lower frequency. A thought that emerges from a field of fear, worry, control, domination, manipulation has less power than a thought that's emerging from a field of love.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to optimize your mindset and to achieve your goals faster.
People say to me, well, why do you do your meditations in the morning? I always say, easy. Because if I can overcome myself at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day is easy. That's the biggest mastery, right? Is the self.